Have you ever told someone to pass the buck? Or maybe said that a certain person rules the roost? Well, if you have, you've been using a kind of secret code without even realizing it. So today, we're going to dive into the world of idioms. You know, those super interesting, sometimes totally weird phrases that make our language so much more fun.
I mean, really think about it. Have you ever said something that if you took it word for word would just be bizarre? Of course you have. We all do. And that's the absolute magic of idioms. They're like these little conversational shortcuts, just packed with meaning. Today, we're going to decode a few really common ones. Okay, first up, let's jump into the world of power dynamics. We're talking about conflict and control. These are the idioms we pull out when we need to talk about who's really in charge, who's calling the shots, or who's up against a big challenge. So, our first one sounds like it belongs on a farm, right? But you're way more likely to hear this one in an office or maybe even at a family dinner. It's to rule the roost.
To put it simply, to rule the roost just means you're the one in charge. You're the boss, the dominant person in the group. You're basically the top bird, so to speak.
For instance, if you say, in that office she rules the roost, everybody instantly gets it. They know she's the one with the real power, making the final calls no matter what her official job title is. All right, next up, let's get into what I'm calling the responsibility game. This part is cool because we've got two really powerful idioms that are total opposites. Each one tells a completely different story about accountability. So here's the first one, and I guarantee you've heard this when things go south. To pass the buck. Passing the buck is all about avoiding blame. Fun fact, this probably comes from poker back in the 19th century. A marker, sometimes a knife with a buckhorn handle, the buck, was passed to whoever's turn it was to deal. So if you didn't want that pressure, you would literally pass the buck. And you see this all the time, right? Someone makes a mistake and instead of owning it, he passed the buck and blamed his coworker. It's a perfect, bite-sized picture of someone dodging responsibility. But what about the opposite? What do you say when you do want to take responsibility? Well, you use this incredibly strong phrase, the buck stops here. This is a big one. It was made famous by U.S. President Harry S. Truman. He actually had a sign on his desk that said this. It means, I'm the one who's ultimately responsible. The blame isn't going any further. It's a true hallmark of leadership. And you can just feel the weight of it in this example. When a manager says, the buck stops here, it's my fault, that sends a powerful message of ownership and a real commitment to fixing the problem. So let's just put them side by side for a second. On one hand, you've got passing the buck. That's all about avoidance. And on the other, you've got the buck stops here, which is all about acceptance. These two little phrases represent two completely different ways of thinking about responsibility. Okay, for our last section, let's talk about choices and beliefs. These are the idioms that help us talk about the kinds of decisions we have to make and, that feeling of doubt we sometimes get. This one has such a great name, Hobson's choice. Now, it sounds like you've got options, but the reality is a little bit different. So a Hobson's choice is basically the illusion of a choice. The story goes that it comes from a guy named Thomas Hobson, who owned a stable in England way back in the 17th century. To keep his best horses from being overworked, he told his customers they could take the horse closest to the door or no horse at all. Classic take it or leave it. This example really makes it clear. It's a Hobson's choice. Take this job or stay unemployed. The choice isn't really a choice, is it? It's between one thing and nothing. And finally, let's look at a phrase for when you're just not buying what someone is selling. It's a classic, kind of folksy American idiom. I'm from Missouri. Now here's the thing, you don't actually have to be from Missouri to say this. It's just a really colorful way of saying, I'm skeptical, you're gonna have to prove it to me. It got famous after a U.S. congressman said in a speech way back in 1899, I'm from Missouri, you have to show me. So if someone tells you, you say it works, I'm from Missouri, show me. They're not being rude, they're just asking for a demonstration. They want to see it with their own two eyes before they'll believe a word of it. So, after breaking down a few of these, what's the big takeaway here? What really makes these odd little phrases so important in how we talk every single day? Well, idioms are so much more than just quirky sayings. They're incredible shortcuts for really big ideas. Just think about it. It's way faster to say someone is passing the buck than to explain the whole concept of avoiding responsibility. Plus, each one is like a tiny little time capsule, right? It connects us to a poker game, or a president's desk, or even a stubborn stable owner. They're really proof that to get a language, you have to get its stories.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Now that we've pulled back the curtain a little bit, what's an idiom that you use all the time without even thinking about it? What's a part of your own personal secret code?